Imagine that you're a parent with a teenage daughter who's finishing up high school. She decides that she's not going to complete and drops out just one class shy of getting her diploma, wants to move away from the small town to the big city, and there's little you can do to stop her because she's 18 years old. Once she gets out there, you see her living a life that you're unsure how she's paying for. Maybe you start thinking she could be a dancer. Maybe she's working at a adult entertainment club of some kind. And you find out it is much, much worse. That's the case that we're talking about today in the disappearance of Corinna Slusser, and her mother is still looking for answers more than 2 years after she disappeared. And this is despite very wide coverage in terms of major media. This case has been featured on Dr. Phil. It's been featured on numerous publications online that are very, very big publications. But it seems like the Searchlight has moved away from this case over the past year. And we're going to try to fix that right here, right now. It's time to turn on the Searchlight for Corinna Slusser. Welcome back to Searchlight. I'm John Lorden. Thank you so much for spending some time with me here today and diving into this case, which does have a pretty big recent development that we're going to get to by the end of today's video. Sex trafficking is obviously not just a nationwide problem, but a worldwide problem. We've talked about it several times in the past here on the channel. We actually support an organization called Destiny Rescue with a monthly donation. We've been doing that for years already. We did other donations before that, but they focus primarily on fighting sex trafficking in third world countries, which of course has its own challenges. But here in the U.S., we have a problem with it as well, and some unique challenges that come with that. We've learned from talking to our friends at Destiny Rescue that there's usually control mechanisms that are put into place in these sex trafficking cases. As a matter of fact, I did a little more research and tried to reach out to another new resource of mine to see if I could learn more. That resource is Magellan TV, and they are also sponsoring today's episode. Now, Magellan TV is a new streaming service that focuses specifically on documentaries. This service is founded by filmmakers that are working really hard to create and also procure content for their platform that you really haven't seen before. They're looking for different stories, different perspectives, and highlighting and showcasing that on their platform, which I really appreciate because I'm always looking for new perspectives like that. They are working very hard to bring new content weekly. They cover everything from history to science to nature, and yes, they are now featuring true crime as well, and that category is growing just over the few months that I've had access to the service. And on top of all that, they've got 4K content. You don't have to pay anything additional for the 4K content. So I went looking into that service to see if there was something I could find that would help give me some better insight and perspective for the episode that we're talking about here today. And that's where I found Red Light, Green Light, the fight against sex trafficking. I think understanding the control mechanisms in trafficking and having very direct conversations with your family could be one of the best tools that we have in trying to fight this, or at least trying to make sure that it doesn't happen to you directly. So I really recommend checking out Red Light, Green Light, and you can do that on Magellan TV. Magellan TV can be watched anytime, anywhere on your television, laptop, or mobile device. It's compatible with Roku, Amazon Fire TV, iOS, Google Play, Apple TV. On top of that, if you go to magellantv.com/LordenArts, you'll get a free month of service. The links that you need are in the description box below. So please check them out, and a big thank you to Magellan TV for sponsoring today's content. So here's a quick rundown of the major control mechanisms. I learned directly from that documentary about what's called a lover boy. And this is essentially someone who is functionally a pimp, but in terms of their relationship with your loved one, they are seen as a romantic partner. This is someone that is effectively using love to control another person and to pull them into this industry, typically of prostitution. But that's another thing about trafficking. It can actually cover other industries as well. It could be manual labor. There's all kinds of different categories about how people are trafficked. So love, very strong one that is pretty frequently used. Of course, money. If the person doesn't have access to funds, if the person might not even have a home, very easy to control people by all of a sudden offering them an avenue for all that. And all they have to do is do what you say and keep doing what you say. On top of that, of course, is drug use. If the person becomes an addict, and they might not be to start with, but if they're brought into that lifestyle, and all of a sudden now they have this daily habit that's costing them X amount of dollars, how do they keep that fed? Typically, traffickers will work on that as well. So the thing that is really tough about Corinna's case is I believe we've got several of those different control mechanisms all working at the same time. And on top of that, we've got a very big possibility that she could have been moved. I don't think that she's even in the state where she went missing anymore, and we're going to see some confirmation of that from the investigators as well. Let's go ahead and jump into this case and get to these details, starting with a poster. Corinna Paige Slusser, missing from Queens, New York City, September 20th, 2017. And here we have several pictures of her, and I really appreciate how they put this photo montage together, because you can see in this middle picture, she has a little more weight on her face, and it very significantly changes her look. Here on the left, we can see it's a little bit leaner, and you could almost theorize that those are two different girls, maybe sisters, but you could theorize those might not be the same person. Of course, there is a very interesting character that we see down here. We're going to learn more about him as we go, and thankfully, she has a very identifiable tattoo. And if we are talking about her being in prostitution, there is a good chance that someone may have seen this tattoo that is fairly unique, that is on her sternum, running down the front of her chest. Her date of birth is October 6th, 1998. She stands at 5'7" tall, 140 pounds. Her hair is blonde. Sometimes she does have green ends, and that's why they're showing this third picture over here where you can see the ends have been colored green. Although I have seen other pictures of her where she's not always blonde. Her hair can kind of look more brown in certain photos as well. But as you can see in this middle picture, it looks like it's been bleached to a point of looking extremely blonde. So there might be some variation with her hair color. Also, we don't know what she's been told to do by whoever is managing her at this point. I even hate saying that, really controlling her at this point. There's another tough aspect to all this in that people that are trafficked aren't always aware that they're victims. The Vanished did a podcast on this story. Of course, I'll have a link to that down below as well. They had an expert come on that really hit some good points about that. It's a little bit of a tough listen in the second half with the expert. It's heavy. This is a heavy, serious topic. But once again, if you're trying to educate yourself to make sure that you can have good conversations with your family about this, I really think that you should check out that as well. So I'm also including that in the links down below. Moving over to her Facebook page, it's a very simple page, and I don't know if it's locked down, but I'm not seeing a whole lot of activity on it. Basically just her changing her photo pretty often. But on the About page, we can see that it says she studies business management at Indiana University of Pennsylvania. We're going to find that is not true. It seems to be a story that she told certain friends of hers. She had another story that she kind of told other friends. One other very big aspect of the Vanish podcast is Marissa does interview Corinna's mother. So we do get a bit of a good sense there about what happened kind of leading up to her moving away to New York City. It seems like the relationship was kind of tough between the two of them. Corinna was acting out a little bit with her behavior in school. I think her mom was trying to rein that in, and things just did not go well on that front. And it's so tough because how many of us can say that? How many of us can say that, yeah, you know, I had a tough year or two with my parents right around that age. It's kind of a normal thing. So that's really why I think we need to understand what these control mechanisms are and make sure that we're having some type of meaningful conversation with our children about those so they understand those as well. Someone might approach you saying, I'm going to give you this, I'm going to give you that, and you could wind up in a really terrible, terrible situation. Continuing with the post at the Charlie Project, once again, a very big thank you to Megan for all of her hard work on this website. We also support Megan monthly with a donation as well. We can see Megan did a great job pulling together a bunch of different photos of Corinna so you can get a very good sense of what she looks like. But here under medical conditions, we do see something fairly important. Slusser attempted suicide early in 2017 and was diagnosed with depression. From what I understand, this was a suicide where she tried to take, I think it was acetaminophen, but she took like 50 or 60 pills. It made her sick. She had to go to the hospital. Thankfully, her life was saved. But you could see she was certainly struggling leading right up to her leaving her home and then what quickly happens after that. It also notes here that Slusser may use the first name Carissa, so that could be important. I wanted to share that also. Let's continue with some of the backstory on this case at the Charlie Project. In 2017, Slusser dropped out of Bloomsburg area high school one class short of graduation, and that is in Bloomsburg, Pennsylvania. That is where she was living at the time before she decided to move out and go to the big city in New York. She had been a cheerleader in school and dreamed of becoming a makeup artist. As a matter of fact, her mom comments on the Vanish podcast that not only was she an amazing makeup artist, which I think you could see from the photos of her, her friends all knew she was great with it. They would come over and ask for their makeup to be done. And she even thought about starting a YouTube channel where she could feature her skills doing makeup. She didn't get along with her mother and hoped to move in with her aunt in Massachusetts in January of 2017. That really doesn't pan out. Essentially, the aunt figures out that she's not going to be home for a period of time when Corinna's going to be there, and it kind of makes her nervous. And she decides that it's not the right time for her to do that. The aunt now wishes that she would have just let her move in, obviously, with her missing. But there's no way to see the future and to know that that's going to be the outcome. And I really hope that the aunt is able to not blame herself for that decision. I don't think there's any blame that could be laid on her for that. In the summer of 2017, she met a man named Giovanni Peguero, who told her he could give her a place to stay in New York City. She traveled to New York in July, taking only her cellular phone and identification. Apparently, she literally left everything else behind, like all her clothes, all her belongings. She takes her cell phone and ID and just takes off with this guy. And Giovanni, by the way, is 32 years old, I believe, at this time. She did keep in touch with her family and friends, and she contacted them on a near daily basis. On top of that, she was a pretty big social media user. She was posting all the time, so there's a little trail that we see, and that's part of what's concerning about this, because all of a sudden that trail just stops cold in September of 2017. At 1 a.m., August 25th, and I believe this is only a few weeks after she has moved to this area, Slusser called 911 from the Harlem Vista Hotel in Manhattan and said Peguero, a man whom she identified as her pimp and called Daddy, had stolen $300 from her, and that when she confronted him, he grabbed her by the throat, choked her, and slammed her against the wall. When police arrived at the scene, she was still very upset, shaking and crying. Peguero was arrested and charged. A temporary order of protection against him was issued by the court on Slusser's behalf. When her family in Pennsylvania found out about the attack, she downplayed it and told them there was nothing to worry about. And that's a little bit of an interesting story as well. Eventually, they only found out about the attack because a copy of the protection order was sent to her home address, which was still listed as her home in Pennsylvania. Her mom literally hits the mailbox, pulls this thing out, and finds out, oh my God, my daughter's been attacked. In September, Slusser's grandfather died, and Slusser agreed to go to his funeral in Florida. But a day later, she called her mother and said her Social Security card and driver's license had been stolen, and so she couldn't fly. She did, however, want to return home. I'm wondering about this because I'm wondering if her Social Security card and driver's license being taken from her is some other aspect of a control mechanism, something that was done by someone that's pimping her. I don't think that, especially when you consider when she moved out, the only two things she took were, her cell phone and her ID. Well, now one of those two important things she's not having access to anymore. So I'm really wondering what happened there. In terms of her wanting to return home, this is another thing that is just, it's really tough. And I hope her mother doesn't blame herself for this either. They had a phone call where she was saying, "Mom, I want to come home." And her mother was like, "Okay, but you're going to go back in school. You're going to get a job. You're going to do this. You're going to do that." And of course, I believe that's the last time her mother actually speaks to her. So it's another one of those things where, and I don't know if her mother realized that she was in prostitution at that point. But when you're dealing with family members like this that are potentially in dangerous situations, I think there's something that we could learn just looking at this story. And if we're getting an opportunity where they're saying they want to come home, stop the conversation at that point, say, "Okay, where are you? I'm coming to get you," and just drop everything and make that happen. Like I said, I don't think her mother had the foresight to know that this is necessarily what was going on in her life. But for the rest of us, if you even fear that that's something that's going on in your relationship with your child, just stop talking. Close the deal. Like if you're thinking about this from a sales perspective, don't talk yourself out of that yes. Get off the phone, get in the car, and go get them. Just go get them and bring them home. Just another very sad aspect to all this, that the relationship was so tough between her and her mother. And of course, I'm sure her mother has a lot of unresolved feelings about that right now. Slusser's mother went to the funeral on September 19th, and Slusser was supposed to arrive home in Pennsylvania the next day, but her mother wasn't able to get in touch with her. And then, of course, she does report her missing. Now, interestingly, she reports her missing, I believe, on September 17th, and she is seen again after that. We don't have a really solid source on who's the person to actually see her, but we do have a location. So let's move over to NamUs and get some more details here. Date of last contact, September 20th, 2017. Corinna is missing from Bronx, New York at the age of 18. She is now 21 years old. Another interesting thing here, her mother actually sees that the NamUs case gets created, and she comments on the Vanish podcast that she believes that something changed around spring of 2018, where all of a sudden the authorities were really paying attention to this missing persons case and starting to take some action on it. That's just, it's a big gap. And you hate to think about it this way, but you wonder, is it because they figured out that she was prostituting and she just kind of hit the bottom of the priority list? I don't know. But we can see there's certainly a gap between when it was reported and when the NamUs case is created. Circumstances of disappearance. Corinna came to New York City from Pennsylvania in August 2017. She was last seen leaving the Haven Motel in Queens on September 20th, 2017, and hasn't been seen or heard from since. I really wish we had more details. Who saw her? What was she doing? Was she with someone? Did she get in a vehicle? What direction did she go off in? What clothing was she wearing? It doesn't seem like we really get a lot of that detail. Here at NamUs, they have her hair color at blonde strawberry. They note she has blue eyes. They do talk about the tattoo that we've talked about previously, but they also say there's another tattoo on her right hip. I'm not sure what that is. I haven't seen a description that matches that. Nothing for clothing and accessories, nothing for transportation. And here, once again, is just a picture of that tattoo. This tattoo is so recognizable. I really hope someone out there that has seen this can call that tip in and help this family, help the authorities get on the trail of where she is. Because quite honestly, I think she could be anywhere in the nation and possibly even outside of the U.S. at this point. Continuing at New York Daily News, with this is a picture of her. I think this is the last Facebook image that she updated. She changed her profile pic to this image. Cops fear a missing Pennsylvania teenager who hasn't been seen for weeks is the victim of sex trafficking. And they came out with it very, very quickly. And I think when you look into what's gone on with her very recent history around this case, it's hard not to say that. You've got a guy that's attacked her. He has previous charges. He's basically known as being a pimp. And then all of a sudden she goes disappearing a number of weeks later. Now I know that's a really big cause for concern, but we're going to find out there's actually another pimp that might be involved with this as well. And is that good or bad for this case? I don't know, but there's just a lot of moving parts. She was last seen the early morning hours of September 20th at the Haven Motel. Previously lived in Bloomsburg, Pennsylvania, and she did make a post on Instagram on September 10th. That photo was tagged as coming from the Bronx, and we're going to take a look at that over here at Philly Voice. This is the photo. I can tell you publications are just running wild with this photo in terms of trying to understand it. There's some people that think it's her. I don't know if it's her or not. The skin tone seems to be different from most of the photos we see, but when I look at some of her older photos in Facebook, it seems like it could be possible. There's some publications that think this is a man. There's some publications that think this is a woman. It's really all over the place, and I haven't heard a very good, strong explanation of who this is. Slusser, an active and popular social media user, last posted on Instagram on September 10th showing someone, possibly her, smoking what appeared to be a blunt in the Bronx. On September 7th, she posted photos of an apartment in the Bronx, which she said she had, quote, all to myself. And we can see that post down here. This was actually from her Twitter account, which I'll have a link to in the description box below as well. It looks like it's a reprinting of an apartment rental page. I don't know if this is legit. I don't know if she actually even rented this place, but it was one of the things that raised a question for her mom, because she's like, how is she affording $750 a month when she doesn't have a job, as far as I know? So I don't know if this actual location really comes into play with her case at all, but the Haven Motel certainly does. And we can see here the Haven Motel. Let's just go ahead and drop to the street view real quick so you guys can get a bit of a sense of what it looks like. I do think it's gone through some renovations. I've seen some other photos of it where it looks really kind of scary. But we can see it just looks like a typical two-story motel. They even have their own website, havenmotel.net. And if you come here, what you're going to see is basically a bunch of stock image photos. I don't think I've seen one real image of the actual motel on this website. You can see these are all stock image photos. Wow, looks really nice, doesn't it? I bet that's not even a room from this hotel. So it looks kind of like a pretty face in terms of a website that's been set up for this motel. But there's been other articles written about this dating all the way back to 2012. Motel resurfaces as a haven for prostitution. Yes, this is the same Haven Motel. As far back as 2005, residents on 68th Avenue behind the Haven Motel complained about illicit activities spilling out of the location and onto their street. In March, the Queens District Attorney and NYPD shut down two other motels, one in Jamaica and one in Kew Gardens, for allegedly welcoming prostitution. I don't know why they haven't shut this place down if all of a sudden it's that bad, but essentially shutting down those two places seems like it moved all the traffic back to the Haven Motel. Neighbors of the Haven said that's right when they started finding condoms littering their street, drugs being exchanged, and men seeking sex. Police and the motel staff, however, say the situation was mostly remedied long ago. So we can see this place has a history. Mohan Patel, the motel's manager, said he's seen no increase in drug use or prostitution. I'm pretty sure this is one of those people that isn't exactly looking in the right direction when the stuff's going on. After meeting with local politicians and neighbors in 2005, Patel installed security cameras, hired a security guard, and posted signs warning customers not to disturb neighbors. Really interesting point there that I'm wondering about is security cameras. Is there footage of her or who was with her at that time? But we can see those security cameras installed somewhere around 2005, maybe a little bit later. So I'd like to think that system was still active, but who knows? It's certainly been a bit of time. Back then, the hotel may have had a problem, but not anymore, he said. Well, what if we take a look at the Haven Motel on Yelp? We can see it's only got 1.5 star, 10 reviews, and several of them have interesting things to say. This one from Juliana D was posted in 2011. It was my first time staying in a motel, and it was skeevish, I won't lie. Only bad thing was that we paid for the night, and at 3, I suppose she's saying a.m., we were awoken to the annoying ring of the phone. When my boyfriend answered it, it was the front desk telling us our time was up. We checked in at like 12:30. Leah B from 2019, literally about a month ago. This motel is trash. The bedsheet had blood stains on it. Veronica S in August of 2019 actually includes a photo of Corinna here and a link to an article that is talking about other hotels that are being sued for allowing this type of thing to go on. Review after review, and once again, another mention of Corinna here. They're all pointing to the same thing. Whatever that article said about being fixed at this hotel hasn't really been fixed. Here's one that says it directly from 2014. It's a motel mostly for prostitutes. Seriously. It goes on an hourly rate. The windows are tinted 100% black. And of course, that other story we heard certainly supports the hourly rate if you're getting a call at 3 a.m. about your time being up. So back to the New York Post. Cops fear she's trapped in a prostitution ring. Slusser recently filed a complaint against a man known for pimping women in New York City, police sources said. Corinna's mom, Sabina Tuarto, posted a message on Facebook begging for her daughter's safe return. My daughter was a great student, a cheerleader. She had many friends and lived her life as a normal teenager. I need her home, and I can't bear any more days like this, she wrote on October 10th, 2017. I fear the worst, but I pray for the best and for her to return home. Waiting for an angel to hear my prayer, she wrote. So her friends noticed that when her birthday came and went on October 6th, no one heard from her. And there's some other things we learned here at crimeonline.com. According to Corinna's friend, Kaylee Levan, the teen's close friends and family aren't even clear on where she lived. She said she moved to Pennsylvania in the late summer, reportedly to attend Indiana University of Pennsylvania. Yet another friend, Harley Welsh, said Slusser attended cosmetology school and wasn't attending the Pennsylvania college. So she's got friends that are hearing different stories as well, and I think that's kind of just her attempt at covering up what she's actually doing. It's also unclear how Slusser ended up in New York City, at least according to her friends. They said she had started sharing pictures of her life in New York on social media and invited friends there, though her friends have no explanation as to why she was there to begin with. She was so excited about New York, Levan says. She was excited about having her own place. Yet her family told Fox 6 that Slusser moved to New York after meeting her pimp. NYPD's Vice Human Trafficking team said that the teen could be anywhere, and she is likely being passed around by pimps involved in sex trafficking. Obviously, we have a big concern here, knowing that she effectively filed charges against a pimp. And what would that cause him to do? You know, are you trying to get rid of a problem at that point? And if you are, what are the decisions that you're making? There's a very strong tone that I'm getting from law enforcement through the articles that have come out over the years on this, that they really do believe there's a strong chance that she's alive, but it's kind of highly questionable that she's in the New York area. If I recall correctly, the expert that appeared on the Vanished podcast actually noted that it's usually pretty typical for traffickers to kind of keep people within the same state because there's some very strong laws once you move them out of the state. And on top of that, all of a sudden you get the FBI on your back. I don't know if we have that going on here because this is a case with national exposure, Dr. Phil, numerous articles. So that, I think, has kind of a risk factor to it if I'm looking at it from their perspective, and they might have decided to move her out of New York State. And that's why I think it's really important that we keep the light on this case, that we keep talking about this case, and that we try to keep exposure raised to it, because the possibilities are really out there that she could be anywhere. And it could be, I know there's web sleuths that look into online ads and they're looking for missing persons. It could be one of those that actually finds her. There could be people, I don't know, there could be people that are kind enough that maybe would solicit those types of services, but then maybe they see a video or a picture of her somewhere and say, you know what, that's that girl and her family deserves to know. And like I talked about before, we still don't know where she's at with all this. Does she see herself as a victim, despite the fact that I think it's pretty obvious if you look at the control mechanisms. I think it's pretty obvious when you look at the timeline. I mean, she's there weeks before she's essentially beat up by her pimp. And then I know we still haven't quite covered this yet, but it seems like she does at least get handed off to one other person because someone else comes into the story, and it's not the first guy that we were talking about. Let's go ahead and continue with another article at the New York Post. The mom of a missing Pennsylvania teen is pleading for her daughter's safe return and told the Post she's even praying for the teen's captors. I want her to know that by no means are we embarrassed of what she's done. We just want her home and safe, said Sabina Tuerto. That's another thing that strikes me just from a psychological standpoint. Shame can be a very strong motivator for certain personality types. And you wonder on an emotional level, just what other controls could someone be affecting on someone else like that? She's a beautiful girl and she got herself into trouble, Tuerto said. That doesn't mean she's a failure. This doesn't have to be her life. She's young enough to turn her life around. That is certainly true. I know stories where people have made very big changes in their life and come out of those situations. As a matter of fact, the documentary that I was mentioning at the start of this video has several examples of that in it. I pray for her. I even pray for her captors. I pray they won't hurt her, the distraught mom said. I pray for them to make sure she's eating. I pray for them to give her up. I think there's a lot of us out there praying with you. The Epoch Times, let's continue with another article, this one from November 2017. It really seems like there's a pretty big push in media that happens around November with this. And maybe that push is partly responsible for law enforcement kind of taking additional steps the following spring. But it's kind of a slow trickle that happens after this big initial push. So a lot of these articles that we're looking at are actually from around that time. Detectives believe that she is out of New York State, a high-ranking NYPD source with knowledge of the case reportedly said, according to Daily News. They're trying to determine her whereabouts. Investigators searching for the missing teen alarmed that Slusser may have been moved from where she was living in Harlem or possibly even killed after she filed assault charges against a man relatives say she called her daddy. And that's another thing. If you guys do look into this case for yourself, you might see many articles that don't name the first person that was charged. Of course, we've already mentioned his name because of the coverage at the Charlie Project. It does eventually come out in the media, Giovanni Peguero, but I don't know if he's the one that we really need to be focusing on. I think that there was someone else that was involved at the time of her actual disappearance. And now let's learn about that man. Here's an article from Fox News. This came out November 2nd, 2018, so we're talking over a year after the fact. Man arrested for allegedly forcing missing teen into prostitution. Ishi Woni, 23, was charged in Manhattan federal court Thursday with sex trafficking and sexually exploiting young women, including 19-year-old Corinna Slusser, who went missing September 2017, officials said. Effectively, there were, I don't know if they were Craigslist ads, there were online ads that were found with pictures of her and another girl, and they were advertising their services together. And these ads tied back to this guy, Woni. Quote, Woney engaged in a vile form of exploitation, using force and other coercion to compel young women to engage in paid sex for his enrichment, said U.S. Attorney Jeffrey S. Berman in a release. Woney allegedly forced at least one woman to engage in sex for money out of the Bronx and other places, and he bought online ads promoting prostitution, which featured that victim and Slusser, authorities said. The other victim hasn't been named. I haven't found anything in terms of their identity. It's possible they're underage. I think that's typically when I see a lockdown like that. And we do see a note later that he is engaged in some activity with an underage person as well. Starting in September, Slusser fell in with Woney and the other victim, renting a room in the Bronx, known to be a haven for illicit activity, and exchanging over 800 text messages with Woney between September 10th and 20th. On September 20th, the other victim fought with Slusser because she was jealous of the teen's relationship with Woney. That's when Slusser moved to the Queens Motel where she was last seen. I hope this arrest leads to other things. Slusser's mother, Sabina Tuarto, told the Post Thursday, "I want my daughter found." So this is kind of interesting because we hear that effectively it seems like the three of them are living together in the Bronx. The other girl there's some type of jealousy angle. She doesn't want Corinna there anymore. And then he decides he's going to take Corinna somewhere else to be on her own. I don't know how believable that story is. I don't know if that story is why we think that she was last seen on the 20th at that particular motel. Did he drop her off there and then he told police that, and that's kind of what they're running with for last time of contact? There's no way for us to know. The details just aren't out there. But now we have at least someone being angry with her. We have this guy that she fell in with, and once again, we're talking about a matter of weeks. And how exactly does she fall in with this guy? She goes from one pimp, he gets arrested. I'm sure he wasn't held for long. He comes back out, and from what I understand, they can be very controlling and almost see these women as their property, their objects. He just lets this go to this other guy? Or do they know each other? Did they collaborate in this in some way? Did he hand her off? Is this part of what we're hearing as a possibility of her being handed from pimp to pimp? I don't know, but this is all moving so fast. She moves out there in early August. The fight happens with her first pimp, the charges, and then all of a sudden she's in a room with someone else. Another fight, now she's taken somewhere else. And of course, the 800 text messages, I'm sure they know what the content of those messages are, and I'm sure it's supporting their case against him in terms of the prostitution charges. So does it help? Here is a picture of Woney. That's really the big question. Is this the guy with the answers? And is there something through the legal process that can help that answer come out? It's still a little bit of a question, but we do have some sort of conclusion, at least to his story, with those charges. Continuing at heavy.com, the penalty for Woney, if he is found guilty, could be anywhere between 5 years to life in prison. Woney is accused of the use of an interstate facility to promote, manage, and carry on prostitution, sex trafficking by means of force, threats, fraud, and coercion, and with violating the Mann Act. The Mann Act is a pretty old statute. I think it went into effect in 1910, and essentially is it's related to moving a person, particularly for a prostitution use, from one state to another. And it was made to try to curtail kind of what we think might be going on in this case in terms of some pimp handoff. Woney is also accused of transporting the other victim in the case across state lines for the purposes of prostitution. And then we get a heartbreaking story here on December 26th, 2018, and I'm sure last Christmas was not any easier for her mother. Missing girl's mom spends Christmas alone, aching for daughter's return. Corinna is all I think about, she said. I can never feel happy. It just takes every bit of my energy just to get up every day. This was the second Christmas that Tuarto decided to spend by herself following her daughter's disappearance. She's a clever girl, but she's from a small town, her mother said. She doesn't have the street knowledge to survive out there. I do believe that Corinna also has a brother. So there's obviously several family members that are affected by this. I know if she was capable, she would have called me, the distraught mother said. She's being controlled. I don't know what they've done to her, whether she's on drugs or mentally unstable or whatever, but I know she's not herself. I can't go on for 10 years like this, she said. The not knowing is just unbearable. So a lot of information kicking around in 2017, kind of fewer news articles in 2018, but we do hear about Woney's arrest. We hear about the tough Christmas for Corinna's mother. It would take another year before we get another update on this case. From the New York Post on November 26, 2019, pimp gets 15 years for role in sex ring that ensnared missing teen Corinna Slusser. The sobbing mother of a missing Pennsylvania girl pleaded with her daughter's pimp to reveal the girl's whereabouts before he was sentenced. Where is Corinna? Sabina implored Manhattan federal judge Lorna Schofield of her missing child. Is she dead or alive? Who is the last person he handed her off to? Tuarto wept. Please, Ishi, disclose where my child is. Schofield began to explain that she couldn't force Woney to answer any questions, but was cut off when he suddenly stood up and began speaking. Honestly, I don't know, the 24-year-old said of Slusser's location. I never passed her off to anybody. Is she dead or alive? I'm honestly not sure, but I pray she's alive, he told Tuarto. Concerning. I'm concerned about the initial statement that I never passed her off to anybody. I'm concerned that there might be a veiled implication there that he did something else to her. I'm hoping it's just a simple lie. It's weird to say that in a situation like this, but what's the alternative? Him then commenting he's not sure if she's dead or alive and that he prays she's alive. He should pray that she's alive because he's now sitting in jail for 15 years. What I have seen happen in some other cases, missing persons cases, is occasionally the family will take the direction of getting that person declared dead. And if she is declared dead, that could move things towards some additional charges or at least lawsuits. It could be civil suits as well. But we've got 15 years at this point where hopefully he doesn't get paroled early, where there could be some other motion in this case that could line up additional charges for him and maybe keep this guy in jail. I'm not sure if that's where the family's focused at this point. I'm really not seeing any commentary towards that, but I don't know. I don't know. I believe from what we've learned, he's effectively at least one of the last people to see her. Seems like he's not being very helpful in terms of helping the authorities find her. Woney was arrested in 2018 on charges he trafficked Slusser and others, including a minor and a mentally disabled woman with the IQ of a third grader, according to court papers. I almost feel like 15 years. Shouldn't it be more? I mean, what is this guy doing? This stuff is insane. And then to hear about this kind of hits me weird too. They actually, it seems like, gave him some consideration. He faced up to life behind bars, but Schofield on Tuesday cited Woney's extensive mental health issues, including a diagnosis of bipolar disorder and schizophrenia, before handing down her sentence of 15 years behind bars. According to a post from Corinna's mother, 10 years would have been about the minimum that they were looking. Thankfully, he didn't get that. He got a little more. But a guy that is doing this, first of all, of course, to Corinna, but on top of that, to a minor and then a mentally disabled woman with the IQ of a third grader, we want this guy to hit the streets again at all? I'm personally just very, very surprised by that. So that's really it for the details. That's really where we're at for how this story has regressed up till now. I'm hoping that the big wave of media that happened around this case will swing back to it if there is some type of development, and who knows what that development is. Maybe there is a cellmate in there with Woney that hears something, and that all of a sudden that becomes public and it throws the investigation in a new direction. Maybe there's someone out there that sees Corinna. That's really what I'm hoping for, obviously, with trying to do more coverage and raise more exposure to this case. In the links down below, you will find a link to a Facebook group for this case as well. On top of that, this is a photo of Corinna with her mother, and I'm really hopeful that they can get back to memories and pictures like this at some point in the future. From the Facebook page, I did learn about a new GoFundMe that has been put together. Remember earlier how I was talking about the cameras at the motel? Well, the poster of the GoFundMe here has a little information about that. The motel has been of no help at all, stating sometimes cameras will work and sometimes they don't, and the authorities have exhausted all leads. Her mother, Sabina, has been scammed out of money by people pretending to have Corinna. That's another story that you really need to listen to the Vanish podcast if you guys want to learn more about this case. She goes into that. I mean, she had people contacting her, telling her, hey, Western Union us this money, send it over here, send it over there. Just terrible, terrible things that woman has been put through. We are initiating this GoFundMe page to assist in paying for a private investigator. Can a private investigator help in a case like this? I think it really depends on the person, and it depends on their approach. I think there are some PIs out there that know how to dig into kind of the seedy underbellies of society and navigate those and come out with useful information. So I'm hopeful that that could help in this case. And because of that, we are going to make a donation to this GoFundMe on behalf of myself and my Patreon and PayPal supporters. Thank you guys so much for helping me do things like this. This GoFundMe was just created this past November. It's only raised $150 so far. So if you are also compelled to donate additional funds to them, please check the description box below. I'll have a link directly to the GoFundMe down there. Also in the links below, you will find, of course, a link to the Vanish podcast. And like I said, if you want to dig into this case anymore and there's only one other piece of media you want to consume on it, make it the Vanished podcast. If you want to learn more about sex trafficking, please check out Red Light, Green Light, that documentary, and know that it's for a topic that is so hard and heavy, that documentary really finds a good way to navigate through that without making it so dark and so heavy. Like I mentioned, I'll also have Corinna's Twitter account linked down below. And if you or someone you know is in a situation similar to what we've been talking about today, there is a wonderful organization, the National Human Trafficking Hotline, particularly if you're here in the U.S. Go to humantraffickinghotline.org. There's also a phone number. I'll have those in the description box below. And if you are in other countries, please look for these services. There are good people out there that are willing to help. It's such a tricky situation because it really does come back to those control mechanisms and the point of view of the person that's in that situation. Do they know they're a victim? Are they ready to escape from that lifestyle? And many more different considerations. Let's have a conversation about this in the description box below. Of course, I ask that we remain respectful. I know this is a tough topic. I know it raises a lot of emotions for people out there. Just keep in mind, there's always a very strong chance that a family member is going to run into this video, and I want to make sure that the discussion we're having down there is helpful, is useful, and does not inflame the very hard feelings that they're dealing with. So please help me with that. Before I end today's video, I need to thank several PayPal supporters, starting with Mark Witt, Kelly Joe from I Am Me. Thank you so much for signing up, Kelly Joe. Michael Park, and Jennifer Wilson. If you'd like to support the channel, you could do that over at www.lordandarts.com. Also, if you have topic suggestions, you can also go to lordandarts.com, scroll to the bottom, and send it in through the comment section down there. Thank you so much for joining me on today's Searchlight. I'll see you on Friday with a brand new episode of Brainscratch right here on the Lord and Arts channel.